Presentation of the feasibility study for a pedestrian bridge on 3rd Street Southeast to replace our green bridge. This discussion shall conclude with a date setting of whether or not to proceed. Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Casey Faber at WHKS, here to present on the study that I believe you all received tonight and on the boards that we had for the public open house here in the last 2 hours. So as you know, we were tasked with looking into a couple of pedestrian bridge options. We'll get into exactly what we looked at. We'll just start with a little bit of background. We've been through a lot of this already, but the existing green bridge was built back in 1917. Known as the Green Bridge, Harmon Street Bridge. In 1970, there was some work done on it. I actually had a councilman from that era come up to me tonight at the public meeting and talk about the work that they did back then and how he hopes that a solution is found moving forward here. In 1983, the deck was replaced. Back in 2006, the sidewalk that's currently on the bridge was replaced. And in February of 2015, the bridge was closed for a variety of structural defects that we went over out in the field as a group even a couple years ago. So the repair set of plans that we put together was ultimately not a 15A. Those previous studies really didn't look at pedestrian only use options. And so some additional information was requested by the council to move forward with that potential decision. And so in 2016, VJ Engineering looked at one option and estimated about $1.7 million. You can see the size there. In 2001, it was proposed that the existing bridge be retrofit for pedestrian use, and that was an option that we looked at in 2016 also for about $1.8 million. However, per council discussion in the last few months on the fact that the repair didn't go through and that the cost would be very similar to retrofit the existing bridge for pedestrian only use, it was basically kind of unanimously agreed upon that that wasn't really an option, and that the only option for pedestrian only moving forward was a new structure. So here we are, 2017, and we're looking at two bridge types. We've got the pre-engineered steel truss and the pre-tension, pre-stressed concrete beam. So the past estimates that were provided, I counted a few people tonight, but the past estimates that were provided were for a 360-foot long bridge. That makes sense from an estimating perspective to look at a similar bridge length than what's out there, but for the reasons that are outlined in the report, it makes a lot more sense now that we know a little bit more and where we're moving to look at a bridge that can use standard design elements like the abutments, that has less interference with the existing structure. As they're driving piles, we won't be driving piles into old ones. So we're looking at 335-foot spans instead of 120-foot spans. So about 45 feet longer, so instead of 360, 405 for a total length. The other benefit to this is, and there's been a lot of concern in our discussions with you all, is the hydraulic concerns with flooding. And so a longer bridge has potential positive impacts for the future flood concerns in Waverly. For the first option, we looked at the pre-engineered steel truss bridge. We looked at a few variations of each so that it wasn't just one option versus the other option in bridge type, but both bridge types are very highly customizable. So there's a parallel chord where top and bottom chords, or if you're looking sideways at the truss, it's level and square across, versus a bowstring that has a natural arch. I know Dan had kind of shared some pictures in the past and had talked through some of the aesthetic enhancements of arching that top chord. I'll show a picture on the next slide. Additionally, we looked at different steel finishes, weathering steel, which is a natural rust and brown color, or a painted finish. You could paint it green or any color of the rainbow really that you choose. We looked at 10 feet versus 12 feet in width. As you remember, Mike presented on the Janesville Bridge is 10 feet wide, 12 feet provides a little bit additional, but for the similar length, 10 feet is what Janesville has. And then we also look at different design vehicles. An H5 is a 5-ton, 2-axle truck, so it's like a pickup, a service pickup that's loaded with some equipment. The H10 is more of a box type vehicle, a small box vehicle, somewhat like an ambulance. And so, I'm not talking about that, Deb.
Go ahead. Don't let me
I'll just
bother you.
keep talking. The H5 is the standard for a 10-foot width, and the H10 is the standard for a 12. And so we looked at a 10-foot upgrading to an H10. So we'll show that cost in a moment. But here you can see the different truss styles that we looked at, the top being the parallel cord, and the bottom being the bowstring. So where the top line of that bridge in this elevation view has a natural arch to it, so it's a naturally more aesthetic view. Here we've got a couple of examples. On the left is a standard cross section. On the right is a picture of a bridge that we did in the Mason City area. It uses a weathering steel finish, so it's a rusted brown. It also uses a concrete deck like we were looking at for this study. Here's that same bridge showing a side view. You can see how even if a parallel cord style like this, there is natural arch or camber to the truss itself. And so it wouldn't just be straight segments, it would follow a natural curved line. So it allows for a pretty aesthetic view of the standard bridge type. There's several advantages and disadvantages of both. One of the primary advantages of the pre-engineered truss is that it's reflective of the existing bridge. The existing bridge is a truss, while it won't be exactly the same size, scale, or style, it will be reminiscent of that existing structure. It's a very naturally aesthetic style. As you can see in that last picture, although the trusses would be similar in height to a concrete beam bridge, you can see through it somewhat, so it doesn't naturally detract as much from the landscape. There is some potential acceleration of construction schedule because the concrete deck is placed on steel pans that are actually attached when the bridge is shipped, and so you might save a couple weeks on construction schedule. The other thing about this bridge type is that because each span is independent and not continuous like a concrete beams option is, there can be more of a steep incline in the last span, which makes the approaches shorter to tie in. So the berm that needs to be built from the existing grade up to the bridge would be a shorter berm, so there's less construction costs there. Weathering steel is a low maintenance. It does require regular washing, but the rain does some of that, but it would be up to probably city staff or hired out for a lot lower cost to go out and wash the bridge off to meet the routine cycle. The main disadvantage of it is that it is a regular maintenance item. A concrete beam bridge is not anticipated to have nearly the same schedule of maintenance or costs of either option. The painted bridge costs are very high to go out and do maintenance on a painted bridge. When we were talking about the repair option, $400,000 of the $2.35 million of that price tag was in painting, and that was with the bridge on the ground. And so the bridge staying over water, fully contained, blasted, and painted could run in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now that wouldn't take place but every 20 years or so, but that's a huge cost that needs to be considered, and so we just want to disclose that. Another thing is snow and ice control. We live in Iowa, and it's something that you need to deal with. And if you can't get out ahead of traffic, snow and ice pack can be a problem because you can't use de-icing chemicals on bridges like this because the open deck will allow those chemicals to rest on the beams, and any warranty provided by fabricator is voided by using de-icing chemicals. So we want to be clear about that also. The other thing, we talked about the trucks a little bit. Neither of those trucks are full legal trucks, and so it gets very expensive. If you remember from the study that we did to update the cost, we were around $5.1 million to have a full legal truss bridge. That was for 2 lanes, that was for a sidewalk, so that's a different story. But if we were to design a 12-foot wide full legal load truss, you'd still be talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars more, potentially millions, versus just tens of thousands more. So it's a big difference. So you'd have to limit exactly which vehicles are allowed to cross in emergency situations. Here we can see costs, and so our costs range from the parallel cord, 10-foot width, around 1.25, all the way up to 1.7 for a painted option, bowstring, at 12-foot width. These are all inclusive of any engineering fees anticipated. Contingency at this stage because there's still a lot of unknowns. We're very much at a preliminary stage, and then projected construction costs. So these are total project costs. On to the pre-stressed beam option, concrete beam. Again, we looked at variations of 10 versus 12 foot width. And the primary enhancement that we looked at in this option was different railings. If you remember, the Janesville was very plain. It's a chain link fence. We talked about aesthetic metal options. Tim reminded us that with that we can get really creative and we could draw in some reflection of that truss. We could make a railing that had elements that looked truss-like. We could also put a railing on there that looks somewhat like the existing or the original 3rd Street Bridge, that lattice fence. There's a lot of options out there. There's other standard aesthetic railings that could be put on, or one idea that Mike had was to use a combination railing that would tie it together with the Cedar River Parkway project, where we're using a concrete parapet with a steel rail on top, and that concrete parapet has some form liner in it to look at the rock surface, similar to the culverts that were done for the Dry Run Creek project, but with some coloring added. So there's some photos of a similar rail coming up here. So on the left you can see a standard cross section, and like I mentioned, similar in depth. There's only 2 inches of difference in the depth from the bottom of the beam to the top of the deck, this option versus the truss. The real difference, like I said, it comes into the end spans and how much slope you can have in there. So at the center of the deck, over top of the Cedar River, you're only talking about 2 inches difference with the different options. On the right, we have a photo of an aesthetically enhanced bridge that WHKS designed in Polk County. You can see the piers have a white colored coating applied to them. You can't probably see real well, but they have aesthetic enhancements and rustications imprinted in the piers. However, the chain link fence on top is very standard. It's what's necessary for a pedestrian bridge. Again, we talked about potentially doing something truss-like, so with some diagonal members shown on the left as a proposed option, or the lattice option that was originally constructed and is still out on the wings of the 3rd Street Bridge today. Here's a picture of an aesthetic railing fence that was done on a project that we did in Ames. Again, this is another just example. It's just vertical stiles along the length of it. But in combination at this bridge, we incorporated enhancements for a combination rail. You can see the form liner. Here's a closer picture, the coloring of the stone, and then there's a metal handrail on top of that. This is very similar to what's being designed and currently detailed for the Cedar River Parkway. So that would tie those projects together. You can see the second post from the left there. There's a little gray box, that's a light, so I was talking with Dan a little bit about it. We don't have anything proposed for all that lighting and additional things. That's part of what the contingency is for. But we would incorporate that all in a future final design contract. Again, advantages, less maintenance, less deterioration because it's continuous. As I mentioned, the truss bridge, each span is separate, and so at the ends of each span there's a joint, and so water gets down from that joint into the pier, the bearings, and there's more potential for deterioration. There's lots of customizable enhancements to all elements of the structure, from coloring and form liners to different railing types. De-icing chemicals could be used. The DOT standard beams are capable of carrying full legal loads, so you could drive a semi down it. Now, if you're going to drive full legal loads down the bridge, you probably don't want a chain link fence, and Mike highlighted that last month when we were here, that if you're going to allow any vehicles down it, you probably want to put the concrete parapet, which increases the cost, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Potentially, there's future widening for vehicular use. As a caveat, that would be extremely expensive to widen a 12-foot pedestrian bridge that has railings already on it to a future vehicular use bridge. So know that in advance, that this is not a way to get a cheap option now. The better option would be to take the $1 million that's available and proceed with a vehicular bridge at this time. We're not saying that you should do this and then go with a vehicular bridge. It wouldn't be the most prudent way to get that route. Disadvantages, the style is just not naturally aesthetic. It doesn't imitate whatsoever the existing bridge, and so as you add enhancements, it increases the cost. Additionally, the longer spans mean that we're building up the berms a little bit farther down the roads to tie into things. So kind of the inverse of the truss option. Here we've got the cost. Really, at the end of the day, for base versions, a weathering steel bridge, parallel cord style versus pre-stressed beam bridge with vinyl coated chain link fence, we're very similar in cost. It's where we enhance things. We add an aesthetic railing, and the cost jumps up, $100,000. We add the combination railing and the enhancements to that concrete rail, and it jumps up another $60,000 to $70,000. And so you can see those costs right there. Summary here, just to kind of close, is that those costs are similar initially, but the enhancements add costs and the maintenance costs need to be considered now if you're going to go through with something. And it's really a difficult decision for you and the city to make about considering the historical importance to any new structure that goes in here, as well as the costs for upfront and future operation of the structure that needs to be considered as you decide what to do moving forward. So got the costs up there one more time, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Casey?
These costs also include the demolition and removal, correct?
Correct, yes. Any new structure that's on that alignment needs to consider the removal. So removal of the existing structure is in these costs.
And your earlier estimates of any new construction, pedestrian or vehicular, also included demolition?
Yes and no. So if you remember the last study that we did back in 2016, removal was one of the options. So we looked at that separate, but they would be added together. I've got that study here. If you want to talk about any of the costs, we can look it up. But it was part of those studies that removal will cost this much. If you build a new bridge, it has to include that.
That create a rub-off situation? Folks go up there, look over the handrail at the river, are they gonna walk away with rust on their clothes, hands, that type of thing?
There's notes in the specs that require the contractor to protect the concrete from that for a period of time. We can enhance the specifications requiring, the way that it rusts shut is through application of water. So the more rain that you get earlier on, the more it will actually seal that patina up really hard, more permanently. So they actually require a certain number of water sprays to that in the shop. We could require more to try and minimize that, but I think the standard is 5 and it'd be relatively minimal. The weathering steel is pretty much the standard for trusses used for pedestrian use. I wouldn't anticipate anything past the first summer or season of operation, I suppose.
More discussion? I entertain a motion to set a date.
Move, I guess how do we, I'd like to move that, but how do we determine a date?
The next scheduled meeting will be September 11th. If you want to do it that same.
Any feelings on how fast we?
So I move presentation of the 3rd Street Southeast Pedestrian Bridge Replacement Feasibility Study, discussion of options and setting the date as September 11th, 2017 for taking formal action on whether or not to proceed with the development of construction plans and bid documents.
Second, please.
Mr. Mayor, may I speak to the council before you get into the second?
Yes, you may, but not right now. Motion seconded. Council discussion on this motion. September 11th, next regular meeting.
So on September 11th, we discuss and determine which bridge to go through, is that correct?
Yes, we would pick a specific option based on the presentation that's been made to move forward with construction plans and bid documents.
Or are we gonna have a decision tree like we did the first time around? I'm just wondering, there's 4, 5, 6, 8 options here. How do we?
that would be one way of doing it. In the meantime, we certainly advise a way to get to that point, but I think it's a feasible way to get it done. Just as you did last time, you're gonna know what you want, whether it be weight or width or railings, et cetera. All that will have to be factored in. Yeah, it's a possibility to do that.
We also need to, part of the fruit of this effort is that we now have some financial figures to look at. And we have to weigh whether these are good figures for us as a council and the city moving forward or not. Same as we've done to the points up to this. So I would assume that in that discussion would be, whether these are reasonable figures for us to consider. So we'll be doing that and then choosing, depending on our decisions.
I think Dan's question, though, is, if I'm understanding it correctly, is what exactly is that motion going to look like? Are we going to do some kind of decision tree discussion? I mean, as I understand it, the benefit of setting a date, and one reason I would support setting a date, even though at this point I'm not supportive of a pedestrian bridge, but one reason to set the date is we now have specifics on architecture, on structure, and on options and how much those different options cost. So this gives us then several weeks for the public to become better informed about this, mull it over, let us hear what they want. I, as an at-large council person, feel I have to take the entire city into consideration, and like I've said before, that right now is heavily leaning toward not doing a pedestrian bridge, but I still think all citizens, should look into this in detail, let us hear what you think, and that gives us the time to do that. But the question is, what will that motion look like? I'm not sure. I think it could be a very long meeting if it's at that meeting that we do the decision tree among us. Maybe not, maybe it'll go faster than I think, but I think that's the clarification we need. How do we arrive at are we going to have one motion for one type of bridge, or are we going to actually decide that as part of the deliberation on September 11th?
Basically, that's what I was trying to say, though, that we do need that process of looking at these figures, deciding whether it's reasonable, and then after, if we decide to move ahead, that these are reasonable figures within which we can reach, then we decide on these different options. Dan's question is, but what process then would you exactly use to do that? And I can give it some thought. You can weigh in if you like.
I think you're gonna have two basic. You're gonna have steel or concrete, and then drill down into
Correct.
each one of those options on what.
So we could do something similar we did before, a hand vote on which of those two, if we decide we want to do something in the pedestrian bridge arena, then we decide which of those two, and then narrow it after that, and we could do hand vote and end up with a motion.
Well, I think we've already determined that we want to go with a pedestrian bridge.
No, I think
You have.
Well, as far as our vote was, and Tim said it best, I think we'll never, ever come to a consensus here. One group can come up with a survey all they want on how many people are for what side, and one group, I think it can change from day to day to group to group.
I don't think we've decided, just like before, it's a several step process. Right now, we're just setting a date to take action, okay? So we're setting a date with more information. The action won't happen until September 11th. That'll be the next step where we decide whether or not to proceed with engineering plans and I don't have the exact wording here, but to take the next construction steps. But that's not where we are right now, Dan. I don't agree with
But
you.
this is, this isn't the time to debate, but it needs to be said that council approved 4 against 3 to move forward with the pedestrian bridge.
The exploration of a pedestrian bridge is what we voted for. I'm sorry, but we voted for the exploration of more information on a pedestrian bridge.
We already went through back in the days of, 14 different options, what we wanted to do. over and over and over again.
But pedestrian was never an option.
Yes, it
That-
was.
that was never
Actually,
favored.
It's always an option.
Casey
It was
can
an
show-
option, it was
Casey
not
can show.
favored.
And it was in the decision tree. That's what, I mean, we can sit and talk about this again, but I'd rather just vote. But in 2015, when it was closed, you know, we had 3 or 4 different engineers. WHKS was one of them. BJ Engineering, Butch K all came in and gave different options. Mike had the decision tree that had remove, that had pedestrian, that had repair, that had build new. We went through all of that. It was voted on 7-0 to do a repair at that time. Then we went through a whole year of community input, of more stuff for WHKS and all the different ways to repair it. We went through all that for an entire year. We finally came to a final vote to accept the plans to go out to bid document. That passed 4-3. So we did accept it, and it did go out to bids. And that was passed 4-3. When the bids came in under estimate, that was defeated 3-4. So it was approved to do a repair of the existing bridge. And the pedestrian bridge was always in the original plans that Mike.
It was, but we never, the decision was to proceed with repair. We never came back and said we wanted to do pedestrian. Never.
We are right now.
To
We just
explore
got to
it.
this point.
To explore it,
That's what I'm
yes.
saying. That's all this vote is.
Okay, well, anyway, what we've decided is what we're gonna do. We're going to take a vote next on the 11th on whether to proceed, having looked at these figures, with this bridge. And then, after we do, then we will decide what options we're going to pick and move ahead with the decided option. I think Councilman Alston is exactly correct. That's what I've been following. That's the way we're going to proceed, is that we are going to have feasibility, the intention of looking seriously at this pedestrian bridge, but we need to look at these figures as a council, weigh it. We can predict the vote, but we can't predict it because we don't know for sure where we're going to end up after all the facts are in. That's why we did this feasibility study. Otherwise, you just move ahead. So that will be our procedure. More discussion? Public input.
One thing that I would hate to see happen at that meeting would be us digress into a 14 option discussion, which we've been through before on several occasions. I mean, what we have before us is 2 options. And if we decide not to go forward with those, fine, but it's one or the other.
Correct. I wasn't clear enough, but that's what I meant.
Dean Soish, as you all know, Northeast Waverly. I'm not sure what's going on, because I asked E. Wolstein, Councilperson E. Wolstein, earlier this evening, if she would share with me the relationship of phone calls and emails that she has gotten over the past several weeks in regards to this bridge. Edie, would you relate those figures for the rest of the council?
Well, yeah, what I said without going back and counting exactly when Dean asked me that, I would guess I've gotten 3 to 4 dozen either emails or phone calls in favor of a vehicular bridge and not moving forward with pedestrian. And I've gotten fewer than half a dozen people supporting pedestrian.
Are any of you other council people willing to share that information with the public? I'm sure you're all in the same,
I can share what I've gotten.
okay?
Over emails and phone calls, I've had 0 people contact me about wanting a vehicular bridge, and I've gotten 4 or 5 emails about keeping pedestrian bridge for the safety of the neighborhood.
Okay.
So,
So I'm not sure if, in the results of the K-Way Facebook survey that Paula referred to, plus her other survey with names on, I'm not sure if you're really listening to what the people of Waverly have to say. The pedestrian-only bridge came about from a proposal by Councilman Lampy and Kangas. There was never any discussion other than at a council meeting that came up. Then all of a sudden, it's locked in stone, ready to go. It's just a matter of deciding which style of bridge to proceed with drawings and construction documents and cost estimates. Says Severe Krieger was here earlier this evening at the public meeting across the hall, and he had some figures with him that said that a vehicular bridge with the state $1 million grant would be in the same price range as this pedestrian-only bridge. So, and I know that he shared those thoughts and figures with the council before. So that's why I'm asking, are you really listening to what the people of Waverly have to say? Thank you.
Thank you. Other public input?
You know, another important point too that Casey brought up is they're extending the length of this bridge. Would that also hold true with a two-lane bridge?
Yeah.
So the figures that we've had here, I don't think for a two-lane bridge really are representative of what the total cost would be. And as far as the design cost, we're throwing out figures that of a bridge that's substantially shorter compared to this one. And how much is the city of Waverly willing to pay? Because we're talking about a considerable higher cost with all the projects that we have going on, from a new sewage treatment plant to what we've got going on right now for Bremer Avenue. You've got 20th Street, that wants to get done. I can go on and on and on. I'm sure James can provide a better list of all that.
Parkway, we have the bond for you, so.
Excuse me?
Parkway, we have the bond for.
Parkway for the bonds, and how many bridges do we need across the Cedar River in Waverly? I think if you look at the Adams Parkway Bridge,
And, yeah, maybe after, I got some information after the citizen comment.
We're
They were doing citizen comment. Go ahead, Dan.
how much do we want to pay for a crossing through a residential neighborhood? I think we need to keep our infrastructure so where the traffic goes, where the traffic is meant to be, down Bremer Avenue, down 4th Street, rather than make it infiltrate and make shortcuts. And then, I'm sure that there's already a plan to put a traffic signal at Burger King,
The estimate that we had was about $2 million. Now, you're countering that, but it was the engineering firms that gave us that.
But then take into consideration 45 foot of extra length, what Casey just explained.
Well, I didn't hear him say that. I guess I'd like to hear more about that from him if that's the case.
Yeah, so within the contingency, within the price that we bid for that, that price would still hold. We could put a 360-foot bridge in for that cost. We just think that it's a better option in the case of this pedestrian bridge to design it a little.
Fair.
They're estimations to us slightly longer, which is about 10% of the total bridge cost. However, there's a lot of other costs in there associated with roadway. The design fees wouldn't really change substantially because we were talking about pre-stretched beams, and so it would be less than a 10% difference in cost. I feel comfortable saying so.
Thank you.
But for the two-lane bridge, you would also want to make longer for flood control, is that correct?
It wouldn't be necessary, but if we were talking about the same length bridge, it would be less than a 10% increase from what our estimate in 2016 was to making
10%
it
increase for the longer bridge.
for the longer bridge, yep. Because it'd be offset by somewhat different approaches and tie-ins to the road and everything, so less than 10%.
Jeff Soash, live in Northeast Waverly. A few comments, I guess. You're talking about costs. I know that there's things in the works to raise 7th Avenue because of flood control. A new bridge, vehicular, eliminates the need for that. So whatever costs are figured on using on 7th Avenue could be put towards a new vehicular bridge. The other thing that I've heard a lot of comments over the last number of months about how quiet it is now, and don't have the vehicles and things down in where 3rd Street Bridge since it's closed. I wonder if any of the council people have asked the people on 1st Street Southwest how they enjoy the abundance now of traffic because people don't have an option to go the other way over the 3rd Street that used to be there. Besides that, all of the people in Southeast Waverly or ones of us that own properties and things down in there, it creates an extra distance. I'd like to send a bill to the city every year for my extra fuel costs to go all the way around without having a bridge there. That bridge has been there since 1917. I started using that bridge when I was 5 years old. That bridge is a vital part of our community. Waverly always talks about being progressive. Over the last 2.5 years, you've done nothing but regress because you have not made decisions about this bridge. If this bridge would have been correctly taken care of back when it was closed, all of the extra traffic problems we've had over the last 2 years with all the construction on Main Street would have helped been alleviated because we'd have had another way around and through town. Obviously, unfortunately, our council does not seem to be able to make a decision on this particular item. I am asking the council for somebody to come up and ask for a public vote in November, which will show what the public wants to have done. If the ones of us that have always said we need a vehicular bridge that needs to be replaced are wrong with the outcome, I will assure you that every one of us will probably come up and say we're sorry. But I don't think that's what you're going to find out. And out of all the things that have done in Waverly, I think this is one of the few times that a public vote really needs to be taken care of. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
I think it's great that we have all this input, which is always helpful. You know, one thing I would say is that we have made decisions. It wasn't my preference. I don't know why we waited a year or so to get started after the bridge was closed, and I do agree that things could have been done to prevent the bridge from closing instead of just suddenly being closed, but we weren't allowed to talk about those things for whatever reasons. We waited a year and things finally came around. We did vote. Council went through an entire thing. It got voted on to repair the existing bridge that would have allowed cars and traffic, which everyone here seems to want both, right? Cars and people. And we had that in front of us. And it passed 4-3 to go out and get bids, sealed bids, and we paid WHKS money to prepare those documents. The bids came in under estimate at around 2.7 million, 2.6 million, something like that, which was under all of our estimated costs. And when it came to accepting the bid to repair the bridge for cars, it failed 3-4, 4-3, however you want to look at it. So that was in February. So we did make a decision. We got to a point where we were going to have cars across the bridge. It would have been worked on this year, and for some reason they got voted down at the end. So everyone who wanted cars should have been here for that meeting.
The some reason was that for the same price or less, you could get a bridge that would last for 75 years.
That's not really true, though. It's not true.
Within the range. Okay, rather than go back and forth on that, we're in public comments. We take one more. I think if anybody doesn't know Mary by now, they will. Rachel.
Hi, Mary Sheldross, Southeast Waverly. So many good thoughts tonight. Before I just briefly read through what we have from the Waverly Head Bridge Support Group, I just want to make a brief comment about Paula Stevenson's survey discussion. I took a class in college, a whole semester, on how to diagnose, test, survey, all of that. And what I learned at the end of that was there are so many variables, and that most of surveys aren't really accurately representing the true reflection, the truth. And it was a whole semester of study of why that was the case, all the variables. So I don't put much weight into that, and I also don't put weight into a survey through the radio station. Those numbers are pretty much bogus. Most people aren't doing that. They aren't watching it. I haven't even read it myself. So yes, please, let's just think about the important issues at hand. And as has been mentioned before, this is a very difficult issue for the city of Waverly. And unfortunately, it is an issue that is going to be divisive for a variety of reasons. It just boils down to a difference in quality of life, what the council and people believe is important. And it's probably going to be a 4-3 vote or a 3-4 vote, and I think we all understand that in part of this process. So we're respectful of the other side, but we have something that we've been promoting all along, whether we can, now we cannot protect the historic Green Bridge because it was too expensive for the city, a 20-year fix, and we understand that. So now we are seeking and begging to support and preserve Southeast Waverly as a district. A few notes. The Green Bridge has been closed for 2.5 years now, as Sharon Cashman mentioned at a meeting this summer. And we have found that it's unnecessary for vehicles. Yes, it's helpful at times, but unnecessary. The second thing is plans are moving quickly for the Cedar River Parkway Bridge farther east, and that will open up more vehicle access for heavy traffic. So those two things, I think, are something that we need to keep in the back of our minds as we make this important decision. Our PED group has just 10 brief reasons that we believe that the PED Bridge is the best option. And at the next meeting, we trust that the council will vote for first to put a PED Bridge there, which will enhance the Cedar River Parkway Bridge, just, you know, another step for our city. And then secondly, then they'll vote, we believe whatever is the best decision is fine with us. We want it to be affordable. It's just like in a family budget. We have so much in the pot, and we have to decide how that money will be used. And so we trust your judgment. That's why we elected you as representatives. And just with the Cedar River Parkway, Mike had a big part of making the decisions of how that would be designed, and we respect that. I don't remember a lot of discussion about that, how it would be. And the same with this. We're fine with what you decide. Stay within our city budget, but please, we are hoping for this. So number one, the top 10 reasons why we believe the pedestrian-only bridge is the best option. Number one, it's affordable. It will cost approximately $1.4 million. That's a whole million less than what we were told the Green Bridge repair would cost. Number two, it's long-lasting. It'll be upwards of 75 years of life. And again, it was 20 years before, so now we're up to 75 years approximately. Number three, the Historical Preservation Commission is on record time after time again in the last several years, and this is the one they are promoting to preserve the Southeast District, which is now on the National Registry, and you will maintain that by having a PED-only bridge. And I have that brochure in here. Number four, a PED bridge will protect residents and citizens, limiting traffic volume. We know it's much safer. Number five, it will provide a way to connect north and south of the river without harm to the cultural, historic, and residential atmosphere, which makes Waverly such a great place to live. Number six, a PED bridge will enhance our healthy lifestyles. Emphasis, and this is the new exciting one with the PED-only bridge we experienced when we visited the Janesville one. I hope you all will go and see that one, but it's awesome to think that we could have this be, which goes into number 7, it will be a pride and destination of distinction of our small town. Just like Sharon Cashman said, she had a lot of opposition with the band shell and how that would be done. And once it was done, it was like everybody said, wow, you know, she had people come back to her and say, that was really great, you know, I'm glad we did that. We think it will be another point of pride where we can say, wow, come see our PED bridge, or look, we're having this relay for life, and it's connecting the trails. So it would be part of our cultural future. So it's not digression, it's progression. Number 8, a PED bridge will improve flood control. That's built into it. It will be access for emergency personnel, which has been requested. And number 10 will be a great addition to our city. So we just trust in closing that on September 11th, the council will indeed vote to proceed with this, understanding it's one of those hard decisions to make, kind of like when you're a parent. Sometimes you just have to make the decision of what you believe is best, and we hope that you will consider the Ped Bridge as the best option for Southeast Historic Waverly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. If we're ready for the vote, all in favor signify with yes.
Yes.
Opposed with no. September 11th will be our date of consideration. Regular business